Eamon Kale wiped his grease-stained hands on a rag and sighed. Another day of fixing broken conduits, cleaning up spills, and pretending not to notice the disdainful glances from the wealthy passengers aboard the Celestine Dawn *. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid enough to keep him fed. And that was all he asked for. He didn't dream of grandeur or adventure. Those things belonged to people like the ones boarding today. The ship had docked at Zoreth 7, a bustling spaceport known for its exotic goods and even more exotic visitors. Today's stop was special. Rumors buzzed through the corridors about who, or what, was coming aboard. Some said it was an ambassador from one of the alien races humanity had only recently begun trading with. Others whispered of royalty, cloaked in shimmering fabrics and surrounded by guards. Whatever the truth, excitement rippled through the crew, though Eamon tried not to care. He failed miserably. When the airlock hissed open, Eamon found himself lingering near the observation deck, supposedly to check some wiring, but really just curious. Then she stepped out. Lady Valeth Sirrain moved as if gravity itself bent to her will. Her skin gleamed like molten silver under the harsh artificial lights, shifting colors faintly as though alive. Long, delicate limbs carried her forward with an elegance no human could mimic. She wore flowing garments that seemed woven from starlight, trailing behind her like whispers of another world. Around her neck hung a pendant shaped like a crescent moon, glowing softly against her chest. But it wasn't just her appearance that held Eamon's gaze. It was her eyes. Large and almond-shaped, they shimmered with hues of gold and green, reflecting both wisdom and weariness. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the crowded room. Eamon froze, feeling as though she'd seen straight through him, past the uniform, past the role he played every day. And then she blinked, turning away as if nothing had happened. "That's her," someone muttered nearby. "The Tyran ambassador." Eamon nodded absently, still staring. The Exarans were legendary, a species older and far more advanced than humanity. They rarely interacted with other civilizations, unless absolutely necessary, preferring isolation over integration. Yet here she was, stepping onto a human vessel, bringing with her untold mysteries. As servants scurried to unload her luggage and prepare her quarters, Eamon returned to his duties, trying to shake off the strange sensation lingering in his chest. What was it about her? Was it awe, fear, or something else entirely? Later that evening, while replacing a faulty light panel near her suite, Eamon caught sight of her again. She stood by the viewport, gazing silently at the stars streaking past the ship. There was no entourage, no guards, just her, alone with her thoughts. Something about the way she held herself, shoulders slightly slumped, made her seem smaller, fragile, even. Before he could think better of it, Eamon cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he ventured hesitantly. "Is everything all right?" She turned slowly, her luminous eyes locking onto his. For a heartbeat, she looked startled, almost vulnerable. Then her expression smoothed into polite indifference. "Yes, thank you," she replied in flawless but accented English. Her voice was soft, melodic, yet carried an edge of formality. Eamon nodded awkwardly, realizing he'd overstepped. "Just doing my job, Mom." He backed away quickly, cheeks burning. As he walked back to the maintenance bay, Eamon couldn't help but replay the encounter in his mind. Lady Valeth hadn't dismissed him outright, not like most passengers would have. Instead, there'd been a flicker of something in her gaze. Recognition, curiosity. Whatever it was, it left him uneasy and oddly intrigued. Little did he know, this fleeting moment would be the beginning of something far greater than either of them could imagine. Eamon's days fell into a predictable rhythm after Lady Valeth settled into her suite aboard the Celestine Dawn *. As one of the maintenance crew assigned to her section, he found himself frequently in her presence, or at least close enough to feel her quiet influence. She wasn't demanding like some of the other passengers. She rarely called for assistance unless absolutely necessary. But when she did, Eamon noticed something unusual about her demeanor. Beneath the poised exterior was a hint of unease. It started small, a soft sigh as she reviewed documents on her holotablet. The way she lingered by the viewport, staring out at the endless expanse of stars with an expression that seemed almost wistful. Once, while adjusting the climate controls in her quarters, Eamon caught her muttering to herself in her native language, a lilting musical tongue that sounded both beautiful and haunting. When she realized he was there, she stopped abruptly, her golden green eyes flickering toward him before returning to her work as if nothing had happened. Despite these moments, Eamon told himself not to read too much into it. She was an alien dignitary, after all. Her life was probably filled with stresses and responsibilities beyond his understanding. Still, something about her intrigued him. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he felt drawn to her in a way he hadn't expected. Then came the night everything changed. Eamon was sent to fix a malfunctioning holoscreen in her suite. A routine task, or so he thought. As he knelt beside the device, soldering tool in hand, he heard her voice drift softly from across the room. At first, he assumed she was speaking to someone else, perhaps another member of her entourage. But when he glanced up, he saw she was alone, pacing slowly as she spoke into a comlink. "I don't trust them," she said, her tone low and urgent. "They're watching me too closely. If they discover the fracture..." Her words trailed off, and Eamon froze, his hands hovering mid-repair. Fracture? What did she mean? Before he could process more, she suddenly turned off the device and stood still, her back to him. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then, without turning around, she asked, "How long have you been listening?" Eamon's heart skipped a beat. Caught. Slowly, he rose to his feet, holding up his hands in a gesture of apology. "Not long, ma'am. I didn't mean to intrude." Lady Valeth turned to face him, her expression unreadable. For a split second, Eamon feared she might report him, or worse, accuse him of spying. Instead, she studied him carefully, her luminous eyes searching his face as though trying to gauge his intentions. "You won't speak of this?" she finally asked, her voice calm but firm. "No, ma'am," Eamon replied quickly. "Of course not." She nodded once, then returned to her seat by the viewport, dismissing him with a wave of her hand. Relieved but shaken, Eamon finished the repair in record time and left the suite as fast as decorum allowed. Back in the maintenance bay, Eamon replayed the encounter in his mind. What had she meant by the fracture? And why had she trusted him, or at least chosen not to punish him, for overhearing something clearly private? The questions gnawed at him, keeping him awake long after his shift ended. Over the next few days, Eamon kept his distance, unsure how to act around her now that he'd glimpsed a crack in her otherwise impenetrable facade. Yet, despite his efforts to remain invisible, he couldn't help noticing subtle changes in her behavior. She began addressing him directly during routine inspections, asking simple questions about the ship or commenting on its design. Each interaction was brief, polite, and seemingly casual, but Eamon sensed they carried deeper meaning. One evening, as he adjusted the lighting in her quarters, she surprised him by saying, "You're different from the others." "Different, ma'am?" he asked cautiously, unsure where this was going. "Yes." She paused, tilting her head slightly as though studying him anew. "Most humans treat me as though I'm untouchable, as though I'm not real. But you?" Her voice softened, almost imperceptibly. "You look at me like I'm just another person." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Eamon felt heat rise to his cheeks, unsure how to respond. Before he could stammer out a reply, she added, "I appreciate that." And with those 5 words, something shifted between them. Though their roles remained unchanged, he was still her servant, and she was still the ambassador. Their connection grew stronger, however faintly. Eamon began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she saw him as more than just another cog in the machine of her journey. But even as curiosity blossomed, so did caution. Whatever secrets Lady Valeth carried, they were dangerous, and Eamon couldn't shake the feeling that sooner or later he'd be pulled deeper into her world whether he wanted to be or not. The Celestine Dawn hummed steadily through the void of space, its passengers lulled into complacency by the ship's smooth journey. But complacency has a way of shattering without warning, and for Eamon Kale, that moment came in the form of chaos. It started with a flicker. Lights dimmed briefly in the corridors before surging back to life, accompanied by a low groan from the ship's systems. At first, no one paid much attention. Minor glitches were common on long voyages. But then the flickering turned into outright darkness as power surged wildly throughout the vessel. Alarms blared, red emergency lights bathed the halls in an eerie glow, and panicked voices echoed from every direction. Eamon was in the maintenance bay when the outage hit. Tools clattered to the floor as gravity stabilizers faltered momentarily, throwing him off balance. Grabbing onto a railing, he steadied himself and cursed under his breath. This wasn't just a glitch. It was a full-blown crisis. "Report to your stations." Captain Rayner's voice boomed over the intercom, strained but authoritative. Engineering teams prioritize critical systems. As Eamon rushed toward the main engineering hub, he collided with Lady Valeth in the corridor. She looked startled, her silver skin catching the dim light like liquid starlight. Unlike most passengers, who were either panicking or demanding answers, she stood calm. But there was tension in her posture, a subtle rigidity that betrayed her unease. "You shouldn't be here," Eamon said instinctively, motioning for her to head back to her quarters. "It's not safe." "I can't," she replied sharply, her voice cutting through the noise. "My secure communications line is tied to the central grid. If it goes down—" She didn't finish the sentence, but her expression said enough. Without hesitation, Eamon nodded. "Stay close, then. We'll get this sorted." Together, they navigated the dimly lit corridors, dodging sparks and debris as the ship groaned around them. Eamon led the way, using his knowledge of the vessel's layout to guide them toward the source of the problem. Along the way, Lady Valeth surprised him by keeping pace effortlessly, her movements graceful even in a cramped and chaotic environment. At one point, they'd reached a junction where wires sparked dangerously overhead. Eamon hesitated, unsure how to proceed safely. Sensing his uncertainty, Lady Valeth stepped forward. "Let me," she said firmly. Before he could protest, she extended a slender hand, palm glowing faintly with energy. With a soft hum, the sparks extinguished, leaving the path clear. Eamon stared at her, wide-eyed. "You can do that." She glanced back at him, a hint of amusement in her golden green eyes. "There's much you don't know about my kind, Eamon." Her use of his name caught him off guard. It felt personal. Shaking off the thought, he pressed on, leading her deeper into the bowels of the ship. As they worked together, their interactions grew less formal. They exchanged quick remarks about the situation, shared laughter over minor mishaps, like when Eamon accidentally tripped over a loose cable, and gradually relaxed in each other's presence. Eventually, they reached the auxiliary control panel responsible for rerouting power. Eamon knelt beside it, tools in hand, while Lady Valeth monitored the status updates on her wrist console. For the first time, they truly collaborated, not as servant and ambassador, but as equals working toward a common goal. "You're resourceful," she commented quietly as he patched a damaged circuit. "Not many humans would handle this so calmly." "And you're tougher than you look," Eamon shot back with a grin. "Guess we make a good team." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, a rare sight that made Eamon's chest tighten unexpectedly. There was something magnetic about her, something that went beyond her alien beauty or regal bearing. In moments like these, she seemed human. By the time they restored partial power to the affected areas, the immediate danger had passed. Exhausted but triumphant, Eamon leaned against the wall, wiping sweat from his brow. Lady Valeth stood beside him, her gaze lingering on his face longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Eamon shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just doing my job, ma'am." But deep down, he knew it was more than that. Their bond had shifted again, stronger now, forged in the heat of crisis. And though neither of them spoke of it, they both felt it. The spark of something neither expected nor fully understood. As they parted ways, Eamon couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Celestine Dawn returned to its usual hum after the power surge, but the sense of unease lingered. Eamon couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, not just with the ship's systems, but with the situation itself. The outage had been too precise, targeting areas near Lady Vailith's suite and disrupting communications at a critical moment. Coincidence? He didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Over the next few days, he kept his eyes open, noticing things he might have missed before. Strange figures lingering near restricted zones. Whispers among the crew about unauthorized access logs showing up in the maintenance reports. And then there were the anonymous messages Lady Vailith received. Coded warnings sent directly to her private terminal, which she quickly deleted whenever they appeared. Each time, her expression grew darker, more troubled. Eamon finally confronted her one evening while performing routine checks in her quarters. She stood by the viewport, staring out at the endless stars, her posture tense. "Lady Vailith," he began hesitantly, "is everything all right?" She turned to face him, her golden green eyes sharp yet weary. "No," she admitted after a pause, "but I can't involve anyone else. Not without putting them in danger." Her words hit Eamon like a punch to the gut. "You're already involving me," he pointed out gently. "I've seen enough to know something's wrong. Let me help." For a long moment, she studied him, as if weighing whether she could trust him, or whether trusting him would only make things worse. Finally, she sighed and motioned for him to sit. Lowering her voice, she began to explain. "There are factions within my people who oppose peace with humanity," she said softly. "They see my mission as a betrayal of interests. Someone aboard this ship is working with them. Someone who wants to ensure my failure." Eamon frowned. "But why now? Why here?" "Because Earth is our final destination," she replied. "If negotiations fail, it will set back relations between our species for decades. My enemies know this. They'll stop at nothing to sabotage me." As she spoke, pieces clicked into place in Eamon's mind. The targeted power surge, the suspicious activity, it all made sense now. But what could they do? They were outnumbered and outmatched. "We need proof," Eamon said firmly. "Something concrete to expose whoever's behind this." Lady Vailith nodded slowly. "Agreed. But we must be careful. One misstep, and we risk tipping them off." Together, they devised a plan. Using Eamon's knowledge of the ship's systems and Lady Vailith's advanced technology, they began monitoring access logs and security feeds, searching for anomalies. Late at night, when most of the crew and passengers were asleep, they worked side by side in her quarters, poring over data and piecing together clues. Their efforts paid off sooner than expected. While reviewing footage from a maintenance corridor near her suite, Eamon spotted something unusual. A figure wearing a hooded cloak, slipping through a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The timestamp matched the night of the power surge. "That's Commander Thalric," Lady Vailith whispered, her voice cold with recognition. Thalric was one of her advisors, a trusted member of her entourage. Seeing him implicated in the sabotage left her visibly shaken. "He's not acting alone," Eamon murmured, scrolling through additional logs. "Look, there are traces of unauthorized energy signatures tied to the same areas. Whatever they're planning, it's big." Lady Vailith clenched her fists, her composure cracking slightly. "We need to find out what they're hiding, and fast." Before they could act further, the ship's alarms blared again. This time, it wasn't a glitch. Emergency lights flashed as automated voices announced a containment breach in the cargo bay. Eamon and Lady Vailith exchanged a glance, both knowing this wasn't an accident. "They're moving," she said grimly. "Come on." Side by side, they raced toward the source of the disturbance, their hearts pounding. As they approached the cargo bay, they found Commander Thowrick waiting for them, flanked by 2 armed guards. His expression was smug, triumphant even, as he stepped forward. "Lady Vailith," he said smoothly, bowing mockingly. "I'd hoped you'd stay out of this. It seems I underestimated your resourcefulness. And your pet human." Eamon stepped protectively in front of her, glaring at Thowrick. "What do you want?" Thowrick smirked. "To remind you that some bonds are meant to remain unbroken, and others destroyed. You shouldn't have meddled." With a wave of his hand, the guards raised their weapons, leaving Eamon and Lady Vailith cornered. For a moment, fear gripped them both, but then Lady Vailith straightened, her silver skin glowing faintly as she met Thowrick's gaze. "You underestimate us," she said coolly. "Both of you." And with that, the battle lines were drawn. The standoff in the cargo bay was tense, the air thick with hostility. Commander Thowrick stood tall, his smirk unwavering as he gestured for his guards to tighten their grip on their weapons. Eamon and Lady Vailith were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped, but neither of them flinched. "You've been meddling where you don't belong," Thowrick sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Did you really think you could stop us? The fracture cannot be healed. Not by you, Ambassador." Lady Vailith's golden green eyes narrowed, her regal composure cracking just enough to reveal the anger simmering beneath. "The fracture is a wound your faction has inflicted upon our people," she shot back, her melodic voice sharp with accusation. "You would sacrifice peace for power, betraying everything we stand for." Thowrick chuckled darkly. "Peace, with these primitives." He gestured dismissively at Eamon, who bristled at the insult but held his ground. "They're not ready. They'll never understand what it means to coexist with beings like us." Eamon clenched his fists, resisting the urge to lash out. Instead, he glanced at Lady Vailith, silently asking if they had any chance of turning this situation around. To his relief, she gave him the faintest nod, a signal that she had a plan. "Your arrogance blinds you, Thowrick," she said calmly, taking a step forward despite the raised weapons. "You assume I'm alone, that no one else sees the truth of what you've done. But you're wrong." Her words seemed to unsettle Thowrick slightly, though he quickly masked it with a scoff. "Empty threats won't save you, Ambassador. This ends now." Before anyone could react, Lady Vailith moved with startling speed. Her hand shot up, palm glowing with an otherworldly energy. A pulse of light erupted from her fingertips, striking the nearest guard and sending him sprawling to the ground, unconscious. The second guard hesitated, stunned by the display, giving Eamon just enough time to act. Seizing a nearby wrench from a maintenance crate, Eamon lunged at the remaining guard, knocking the weapon from his grasp. The two grappled briefly before Eamon managed to shove him backward into a stack of crates, leaving him dazed and immobile. Thowrick watched the chaos unfold, his confidence wavering for the first time. "Foolish," he spat, reaching for a device strapped to his belt. Before he could activate it, however, Lady Vailith closed the distance between them, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. "You underestimate humanity," she said coldly, her gaze locking onto his. "And you underestimate me." With a swift motion, she twisted his arm until the device clattered to the floor. Thowrick stumbled back, clutching his injured wrist, his usual arrogance replaced by fear. "This isn't over," he growled, backing away toward the exit. "The fracture will tear apart everything you hold dear." He disappeared into the shadows of the corridor, leaving behind only silence and the ominous hum of machinery deep within the cargo bay. Breathing heavily, Eamon turned to Lady Vailith. What did he mean about the fracture? She hesitated, then sighed. "It's a rift within my people. Some believe humanity poses a threat to our survival. Others, like me, see potential in alliance. But there's more. She pointed to a large reinforced container tucked away in the corner of the bay. Its surface shimmered faintly, pulsing with an unnatural energy. "That's what they've been hiding," she explained grimly. "A weapon designed to destabilize Earth's atmosphere upon arrival. If activated, it could devastate the planet, destroying any hope of peace." Eamon stared at the container, his stomach sinking. "We can't let that happen." "No," Lady Valeth agreed, determination hardening her features. "But disarming it won't be easy. It requires manual intervention. And whoever does it will likely—" She trailed off, unwilling to finish the sentence. Understanding dawned on Eamon. "You want me to do it?" Her eyes widened in alarm. "No, I won't risk your life like that." "And you can't do it alone," he countered firmly. "You need someone who knows the ship's systems inside and out. Someone who can buy you time while you disable the core." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the weight of the decision hanging heavy between them. Then Lady Valeth nodded reluctantly. "All right. Together, then." As they approached the container, Eamon felt a surge of resolve. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just a servant anymore. He was part of something bigger, something worth fighting for. And beside him, Lady Valeth looked at him with newfound respect, seeing not just a human, but someone brave enough to stand with her against the shadows closing in. The hum of the weapon grew louder as Eamon and Lady Valeth approached the reinforced container. Its surface pulsed with an eerie, unstable energy that seemed alive, shifting colors between deep crimson and electric blue. Every instinct screamed at Eamon to turn back, to run far away from this ticking catastrophe. But he forced himself to stay focused. There was no time for fear. Lady Valeth placed a hand on the container, her silver skin glowing faintly in response to its energy. "This is worse than I thought," she murmured, her voice tight with tension. "The core is already destabilizing. If we don't act now, it could trigger prematurely." Eamon swallowed hard, his mind racing. "What's the plan?" She glanced at him, her golden green eyes filled with both resolve and regret. "We need to reroute the energy flow manually. It's dangerous work. It'll require disabling safeguards and exposing ourselves to high levels of radiation. But," she hesitated, searching his face, "if we succeed, we can neutralize the weapon without harming the ship or Earth. And if we fail?" Eamon asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. "We won't," she said firmly, though her tone betrayed the weight of uncertainty. "But one of us will have to stay behind to monitor the process while the other handles the final override. Whoever stays will be exposed to the most risk." Eamon didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." "No," Lady Valeth snapped, surprising him with her sharpness. "You're not sacrificing yourself for me. This is my mission, my responsibility." "This isn't about responsibility anymore," Eamon interrupted, his voice rising despite himself. "It's about stopping this thing before it kills billions. You know the system better than I do. You're the only one who can handle the override. That means I'm staying here." For a moment, they stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Then, slowly, Lady Valeth nodded. Her expression softened, gratitude and something deeper flickering in her gaze. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." With shaking hands, they got to work. Using tools from a nearby maintenance kit, Eamon pried open the access panel on the side of the container. Inside, wires and circuits pulsed erratically, crackling with raw energy. Lady Valeth guided him carefully, her voice steady even as sweat beaded on her forehead. "Careful. The yellow wire controls the containment field. If you cut it too soon, the energy will surge uncontrollably." Eamon steadied his breathing, focusing on the task. One wrong move, and they'd both be vaporized. Carefully, he snipped the wire, causing the pulsing light to dim slightly. "Now what?" "Reroute the red conduit to the secondary buffer," she instructed. "That should stabilize the core long enough for me to reach the override terminal." As Eamon worked, Lady Valeth moved to a control panel on the opposite side of the room, typing furiously as alarms blared around them. The weapon groaned ominously, protesting their interference. Sparks flew from the container, singing Eamon's sleeve, but he ignored the pain, his focus unwavering. Finally, after what felt like hours, Lady Valeth called out, "I've initiated the override sequence. Now it's up to you to hold the buffer steady until the countdown finishes." Eamon glanced at the timer displayed on the container. 30 seconds. Each tick echoed like a death knell in the cramped bay. He gripped the tools tighter, bracing himself as the machine fought against his efforts. The radiation was starting to take its toll. His vision blurred, and his muscles burned with exhaustion. But he refused to give up. Through the haze, he saw Lady Valeth watching him, her lips moving soundlessly. Was she praying? Or saying goodbye? Either way, her presence gave him strength. 10 seconds. 5. 4. The container shuddered violently, threatening to explode. Eamon gritted his teeth, pouring every ounce of determination into holding the line. 3, 2. A deafening roar filled the air as the weapon discharged its remaining energy harmlessly into the ship's systems. The pulsing light faded, leaving only silence. Eamon collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. Lady Valeth rushed to his side, kneeling beside him. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, relief washing over them like a tidal wave. "You did it," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "We did it." Eamon managed a weak smile. "Guess we make a pretty good team." Her hand found his, squeezing gently. In that moment, titles and roles didn't matter. They were just two people bound by trust, and perhaps something more. The Celestine Dawn docked at Earth's orbital station 2 days later. Its arrival met with fanfare and anticipation. Reporters swarmed the docking bay, eager to catch a glimpse of Lady Valeth Surain, the Siren ambassador whose mission could shape the future of interstellar relations. Cameras flashed, questions were shouted, but Eamon Kale stood quietly in the background, watching it all unfold. He'd spent the past 48 hours recovering from the ordeal in the cargo bay, though the lingering effects of radiation exposure left him fatigued. Despite his weakened state, he felt lighter, freer, as if a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had finally lifted. He wasn't just the maintenance guy anymore. He'd played a part in something monumental, something that mattered. Lady Valeth emerged from her quarters dressed in flowing robes that shimmered like starlight, her presence commanding yet serene. As she stepped onto the platform overlooking the crowd, Eamon found himself lingering near the doorway, unsure whether to stay or slip away unnoticed. But before he could decide, she turned her head slightly, her golden green eyes finding his across the room. "Stay," she said softly, almost imperceptibly, before addressing the gathered dignitaries and reporters. Her speech was eloquent, filled with promises of unity and cooperation between humanity and that Siren civilization. She spoke of challenges overcome and bridges built, a testament not only to diplomacy, but to resilience. Yet, halfway through, she paused, glancing briefly at Eamon again. The subtle gesture went unnoticed by most, but it sent a shiver down his spine. When the ceremony concluded, Lady Valeth requested a private meeting with Earth's leadership. Eamon assumed his role would end there. He'd done what he could. And now it was time for the diplomats to take over. But as he prepared to return to his duties, a messenger approached him. "The ambassador requests your presence," the young officer said, gesturing toward a secluded conference room. Confused but curious, Eamon followed the messenger. Inside, Lady Valeth stood alone, gazing out at the blue and white curve of Earth visible through the viewport. She turned as he entered, her expression unreadable. "You've earned this moment," she began, her voice soft but firm. "Not because you saved my life, but because you reminded me why I fight for peace, for understanding. You showed me that courage isn't bound by titles or species." Eamon shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. "I was just doing my job," he mumbled. "No," She countered gently. You were being more than that. And so am I. She took a deep breath, then continued. I've made a decision. I'm staying here, on Earth, to foster these connections, to ensure the fracture within my people doesn't widen further. Eamon blinked, taken aback. Staying. But what about your world? Your responsibilities? They'll manage without me, she replied with a faint smile. And perhaps in time, they'll see the value in what I'm trying to build here. Her word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Then, after a long pause, she added, I'd like you to join me, if you're willing. For a moment, Eamon couldn't breathe. Join her? Leave behind the life he always known? It seemed impossible, yet the idea ignited something within him, a spark of hope, of possibility. He started, then stopped, collecting his thoughts. I don't know what I can offer, but if you think I can help, then yes. Her smile widened, genuine and radiant. Good. Together, we'll find our place among the stars. As they stood side by side, looking out at the vast expanse of space beyond Earth, Eamon realized he no longer felt invisible. Lady Valeth saw him, not as a servant, but as someone capable of making a difference, and in her gaze, he saw a reflection of himself, stronger, braver, and ready to face whatever came next. Together, they stepped forward into an uncertain but hopeful future, leaving behind the roles that once defined them. They were no longer ambassador and servant. They were partners, equals, bound by trust and shared purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can bridge even the widest divides. ********.